Well, thank you, friends. Welcome this afternoon. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mike Ford, Chairman of the Gerald R. Ford Presidential Foundation. And on behalf of our co-host, the West Michigan Policy Forum, the Grand Rapids Chamber of Commerce, and Southwest Michigan First, I welcome all of you. When my dad, President Ford, was sworn into office in August of 1974. It's hard to believe that many years ago. Our nation was facing some unbelievable challenges, economically, socially, even constitutionally. And in addition, there was unprecedented division across the nation of our American people around many, many issues. It was a time in history, a time like no other, when we needed our government leaders to be their very best selves, to work together. It was a time when we needed our leaders to be good stewards of the people, good stewards of our American democracy, to help work together and most of all, to solve problems. It was a time when we needed strong, bipartisan, collaborative leadership to do the right thing for the greater good of our nation. Today, there is a group of 50 bipartisan members of Congress who, like my dad, have committed themselves to finding a way to better communicate, better cooperate, and most of all, to better solve problems. They are finding ways to rise above their party affiliations and to come to an agreement on really what is right and what is good for our nation. And they are also finding ways to communicate with a sense of common purpose and good thinking, common sense. And they're doing this through establishing relationships that are founded on thoughtful dialogue, on deep listening, on mutual respect and trust for one another. To get us started, I want to welcome President Bill Pink, president of Grand Rapids Community College, fine institution of learning here in Grand Rapids that I've had the privilege of spending time on and speaking to the students. So I'm so glad to see Bill again. And Bill too is committed to this spirit of teamwork and collaboration for the greater good. And he will serve as our moderator for today's program. And the program is a conversation on civility and collegiality. And now let us welcome President Bill Pink.
Mike, it is so good to see you. Thank you so much for those words. And thank you for that introduction. And welcome to everyone. Good afternoon. Here in Michigan, we have two members of our congressional delegation, one Republican and one Democrat, who continue to lead and if not push on this idea that Mike just shared that's tied to building civil and collegial relationships so that people and problems can be solved. And there's no time like right now to raise the volume on the need for more of this kind of common sense thinking. And there's no place like Grand Rapids, the home of President Gerald R. Ford, to set a backdrop for this conversation. So please let me introduce our two guests. First of all is Congressman Fred Upton. Fred Upton is Michigan's 6th District's congressman, and he is known in Washington and at home as a sincere, hardworking leader who listens to all perspectives and supports our Midwestern values. He's been recognized as one of the most bipartisan members in the Congress. His landmark 21st Century Cures legislation was a historic bipartisan accomplishment that is now helping with the development of an effective COVID-19 vaccine. Thank you for that, Congressman. Today he's working on a Cures 2.0 effort, COVID-19 assistance, and on a bipartisan bill with Democratic Majority Leader Mitch Claiborne to expand broadband service to rural families. Today, Fred is vice chair of the House Problem Solvers Caucus, along with his good friend, Debbie Dingell, sitting beside him. Congresswoman Debbie Dingell. She represents Michigan's 12th district in the U.S. House of Representatives, where she has made it a priority to be a voice for the Midwest on issues that matter most for working families. She's recognized as one of the 25 hardest working members of Congress, and she's focused on forging bipartisan solutions that support Michigan's families and economy. Before being elected to Congress, Debbie worked in the auto industry for more than 3 decades, where she was the president of General Motors Foundation and a senior executive responsible for public affairs. She was also chairperson of the Wayne State University Board of Governors and continues to fight to make education more affordable and accessible in Congress. Welcome to both of you. We're glad to have you. And I'd like to take this opportunity to ask both of our leaders to offer opening remarks as we get this session started. Representative Upton, please start us off with your opening remarks that you would like to share with our community this afternoon.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you. Thank you all for helping to put this together. We're always delighted to have Debbie, my colleague, on our side of the state, as I've been to hers. And actually, Michael, she and I spoke together on civility and bipartisanship at the Gerald R. Ford Policy Center in Ann Arbor last year, but a number of different areas all around the state. Look, we have divided government. Now, both of us are very distressed about the hardcore partisanship and sniping that you often see. We know that America's problems are our problems, and the only way we're going to get things done is if we work together. So that's what we've done. And as proud members of the Problem Solvers Caucus, as you said, 50 members, equally divided between Republicans and Democrats. We meet literally every week, and actually during the COVID crisis, I swear we probably have 2 or 3 different Zoom meetings every week as we talk about a number of different issues. Probably one of the most significant things that we did last year was we actually changed the rules of the House to create more bipartisanship. And we've seen real solutions to different issues. We passed a major agriculture immigration bill last year by nearly 100 votes, something that wouldn't have happened without the problem solvers. It was our problem solvers group that went to the Situation Room that met with the president to outline a strategy to end the 35-day shutdown a year ago. We're working now actively to look at a COVID-4 package. Both of us, I think, are disappointed the Senate didn't come together for us to go back and get a deal that the president could sign. We know that there are elements that we've got to pass, certainly on schools, unemployment, a whole different issues, a number of issues, liability reform. Together, we can get this done. And that's why the Problem Solvers Caucus is probably one of the strongest caucuses in terms of legislation that's out there, but really developing the relationships, working together on America's problems. That's us. So with that, Bill, I'll yield back. And thank you very much for doing this. And we look forward to the questions that we might receive.
Great. Thank you so much, Representative Upton. Representative Debbie Dingell, please give us your opening remarks.
Thank you, Bill. First of all, I can't tell you how great it is to be here with Fred and to be in Grand Rapids, but to see my friend Michael Ford. And I am a Democrat who is very proud to sit both on the Ford School Board at the University of Michigan and on the Gerald Ford Library Board, because of long friendships, but because of everything Jerry Ford stood for. He was a good and close friend of my husband's. Actually, Susan and I heard stories right before John died that neither of us had ever heard. But they were both men that served at a time when people could disagree loudly. And at the end of the day, you went to the gym or you had a drink or you went home to each other's kitchens and your wives cooked dinner for each other. People were friends. They knew each other, they trusted each other, they respected each other. And they knew the importance of coming together, bringing different perspectives. Tonight, maybe not agree on how to solve a problem, but to understand you needed to solve the problem. And I miss those days a lot. I was lucky enough to be a witness to them. And Fred Upton is my good friend. He was one of John Dingell's good friends. When John was dying, Fred was at my side and one of the first people that was there. When probably one of my better moments of when I was sworn into the House, to I'll give you a little lightness for the day. John couldn't be there because he was there for me many times through the next 4 years, but he had been very ill right after he left the Congress. So Fred was my family the day that I got sworn in. And I was such a member of his family that one of his colleagues thought I was Kate Upton, something I will not forget to this day. So that was one of the highlights. But on a serious note, we've got a lot of issues challenging this country. And I think we all need to take a deep breath and think about the bullying, the name calling, the lying that's going on and tearing us apart as a country. I don't like the fear and hatred that is tearing us apart as a country. You know, words that have lasted a very long time and have stood the test of time are united we stand, divided we fall. And I think we need to do a lot more thinking about what we have in common and how we're going to, COVID is something that has turned our worlds upside down. Nobody's life is normal. Most of us at this point know somebody that has had it, and too many of us know the people that have died from it. How a mask became a political war is beyond my comprehension. So I think we need to do a lot more problem solving. I have friends on both sides of the aisle. I don't know everything. I'm learning every day. And if we learn from each other's perspectives and find that common ground, we can solve some of our nation's problems that need some solving. And I think the American people are tired of this partisan bickering. They're really scared about their lives. There's an anxiety, there's intention about what does the future hold, and they want to see us work together. So I'm honored to be here. Fred and I have done this in other places, and we've been talking about doing this for a long time. So I'm glad the day arrived that we could be in this great city here under the auspices of all of you, but particularly the Gerald Ford Library.
Well said.
Representative, thank you so much. And it's this kind of setting that I think our whole country needs to be a part of. They all need to hear this type of conversation between one that sits on the Republican side and someone who sits on the Democratic side in the House of Representatives that say we need to do this together. So we're honored and thankful. And this is the message that our whole country needs to hear. So those of you who are listening in on Zoom, there's a chat feature that you can utilize if you have questions. We'll try to get to some of those. We have some that we already have prepared, but if you have some of those, please utilize the chat feature. We'll try to see what we can get to during our time together this afternoon. So let's go ahead and get into these questions. And Congressman Upton, I'm going to start with you, and Congresswoman Dingell, we'll get to you on this question second. So it's around COVID-19. The topic is, and Lord knows, that's been a major topic for several months now. Can you provide us some guidance on how Congress can better work together? What is it that you're doing today to help us move forward with transparency and confidence to manage the balance of protecting lives and protecting livelihoods? So talk to us about what Congress can do better in helping us in working together to help us in terms of what COVID-19 is doing to protect lives and to protect the livelihood of Americans in what we're seeing. Congressman Upton, please.
Well, thanks, Bill. It's important that we all come together. And I was glad that the first package that we passed was 417 to 1. And it provided money to the states. It provided some money for testing. As much as we all wanted this to be over by Easter, it wasn't going to happen. We came, and actually our Problem Solvers Caucus was very instrumental in passing the Paycheck Protection Plan, a bill designed specifically for small businesses. And I've heard from hundreds of them and know of thousands across the state that were able to be eligible for the funding to keep money going to their employees. It was limited then with, it was an 8-week program. It was the Problem Solvers Caucus. Actually, my name was on the bill to extend it to 24 weeks and to lower the threshold so that, in fact, the employers were able to take more advantage of it. And, now we've got employers coming saying, we might need a second round because it's still with us. And yes, it is still with us. So how do we get out of this? How do we work together? It goes back, actually, Bill, to your opening remarks, something that I helped shepherd through when I was chairman of the Energy and Commerce Committee. Debbie played a huge part on this as well. We had meetings not only across the state, but across the nation on a bill called 21st Century Cures, a bill to expedite the approvals of drugs and devices, coupled with $45 billion more in health research. In fact, we came right here to Grand Rapids for some of those open town meetings to get ideas on what we should do. Fast forward 3.5 years, we are going to get a vaccine. The vaccine is probably going to come a year or two faster than it otherwise would have, in large part because of what we did with 21st Century Cures, speeding up that approval process. So just in Southwest Michigan itself, Pfizer's my largest employer. They've already begun, they're almost ready to begin the actual production of a vaccine that is still yet to be approved by the FDA. Obviously, we have to make sure that those safety standards remain in place. But literally within the next number of days, they're going to start producing a vaccine that they hope will be approved not until probably the end of September, early October. But they've made the pledge that they expect to make 40 million doses of this vaccine ready before the end of the year, over 100 million next year. But they're not alone. It's Moderna, it's AstraZeneca, it's Johnson & Johnson. They're all on the same page. So we've got to get that vaccine, and we're close. We also have to do more on testing. That's, one of the things Congress has to do. Actually, in that second PPP plan, Paycheck Protection, that we passed, again, with wide bipartisan support, Problem Solvers Caucus, very involved. We included nearly $2 billion for the NIH to develop home testing. And if you actually follow my website, this will be my only ad, upton.house.gov, it's free. You can follow my kitchen table report, where we now have a Michigan entity that's on the cusp of actually getting an approved home testing that's cheap, that's almost instant, and yes, it's accurate. Now, that too is going to be very important, because when you'll be able to, when you wake up in the morning and maybe make coffee for your spouse, as I did this morning, you'll be able to do a saliva test. You'll get it on your iPhone or on your printer. You can take that wherever you go for the day. And so whether you're going to a sporting event or your job, you can show your colleagues that, in fact, you're safe. That's going to be part of this as well, to restore our way of life. So Congress has played a big role in pushing for the funding of this. We've got to do it. And we need another package to help our states, cities, and counties as they deal with the revenue losses, and particularly our schools as they begin now to open up, to make sure they have the resources, not only to protect the kids, our precious sons and daughters, but also the employees at those schools as well. So we got a lot to do yet. It needs to be bipartisan, and you'll see the problem solvers continue to be very engaged in this process.
Thank you, Representative Upton. Representative Dingell, please, same question on COVID-19.
Well, all of the things that Fred has just said, I very much deeply agree with. I think it is very unfortunate that in the last couple of weeks, you've seen such a partisan breakdown in the United States Congress and between the White House on what the next step is. We need another bill. The fact of the matter is the House it's been 3 months now, passed the HEROES bill, which would have put additional money. The biggest, there's several key issues right now, and Fred knows how I feel, and Fred agrees with it. People, at the end of July, people felt like they were going off a cliff. You can't go anywhere and not hear people talk about unemployment. And there are not people who aren't working because they don't want to work. A lot of people have lost their jobs. A lot of people can't go back to the jobs. They have pre-existing conditions. They have children with childcare, and childcare has become a real crisis in this state and in this country. And they don't know how they're going to live. They're talking to me. I am, you know, you could bomb me out of my house the first 3 months, but I'm very carefully. First time I've been out and there's nobody near me that I don't even have a mask on as I'm talking to all of you, but I'm at the farmers markets. I'm going to events that veterans are at, and people are scared. They don't know how they're going to live. They're worried about their mortgage payments, and they're worried about their rental payments. And in some parts of this state, the counties are working with us in the state to try to get ahead of it. People need to go talk to their landlords and to their bankers now. They'll find that a lot of people are trying to ensure that there's not going to be a problem. It's not going to impact their credit ratings. The HEROES bill that passed the House has relief in there for both landlords and in a relief fund for people with mortgages or renter to help pay the rent. But we also don't know or recognize the hunger issue that we have in this state, that our food banks demands have increased by 60%, 80% in some parts of this state. We need to do something about that. And Fred and I agree, he's been as worried about the food issue as I have with our food banks. And we really, as a civil society, shouldn't have people going hungry. So I don't think we should be playing political games. I think we need to be in Washington. I have given up. I kept telling my state and local governments and people I was meeting with, don't worry, we'll get this done by the end of July. But that hasn't happened. So we're going to keep the problem solvers. Fred and I are continuing to push our colleagues to try to do that. And I think we got to take all the partisan politics out of this. I don't know how it's become partisan. I think in the state of Michigan, we're lucky to have a governor who met with experts at the University of Michigan, who quickly told her how devastating this could be. I talked to her right after that happened, and she said to me, Debbie, those lives are on my hands. She felt the responsibility for that. And I wish everybody would just, I know we need to fix the damn roads, but I wish everybody would just wear the damn masks. And if you've heard Tony Fauci talk about it, that would do more for us to be able to start our schools than anything. So thank you, Bill.
Oh, that is good. Thank you so much, Representative Dingell. And I will tell you, I'm going to start with you on this, Representative Dingell, on this next question. It's still in the space of COVID-19, and it's about the return to schools, about schools getting started again and everything with that. Talk to us about what the Problem Solvers Caucus perspective is on returning to school in person or virtual classrooms. Could you share some insight in how what the Problem Solvers Caucus is looking at and some of their viewpoints, specifically with K-12, but honestly, from my perspective, higher education as well. Talk to us about what that perspective is in terms of in-person, virtual, hybrid combination. How has the Problem Solvers Caucus looked at this?
Well, let me just say that there is nothing more precious to a parent than their son or daughter. And there is no way a parent is going to send their son or daughter to school if they feel that they're unsafe, whether it be from violence. And again, Debbie and I have worked together on the red flag bill, a bipartisan bill that got a lot of support, that's makes a lot of sense in a number of states with Republican governors, including Mike Pence when he was governor of Indiana, and Governor Ron DeSantis signed a red flag bill down in Florida after Parkland. But we got to make sure our schools have the right resources. And I was pleased to see that at least in the opening salvo of the Mitch McConnell initiative, he acknowledged that we needed to do more for education, both K through 12 and higher education. He had $105 billion, $70 billion set aside for K through 12, $30 billion for higher education. I've sat down with a number of our universities in Southwest Michigan, Western, K College, others, heard from our community colleges as well. We've now seen community colleges like Glen Oaks actually have on-campus living, something that community colleges didn't do, and they now have to be prepared if someone needs to self-quarantine. What steps are they going to take? Those added expenses. schools, a good number of discussions with a good number of my school superintendents. They want to make sure that those schools are safe. You know, a lot of them are 60 years old. What are they going to do with masks? Some schools are going to require masks for middle schoolers and high schoolers, knowing that they don't have enough funds for, you know, elementary schools. How are they going to keep the teachers safe? We heard, of course, about fall football. High school football is off. Maybe in the spring. It's too bad that decision wasn't made July 1st, so that maybe you could flip a sport. Maybe you could have done baseball in the fall and instead of in the spring. But at the end of the day, we have to make sure that our kids are safe, the personnel, teachers, and others are safe. I am encouraged that when we do get together on a plan, and again, problem solvers are at the table, that we'll have that education piece to make sure that they're covered, in addition to helping our states, cities, and counties. Huge loss of revenue, of course, here in Michigan with a delay in income taxes being collected, obviously the loss of sales tax and road use taxes. Never be able to fix the damn roads if we don't get that resolved. And I'd like to think that that'll be part of a package. Again, there's a bipartisan package on that called the SMART Act. But I'm a co-sponsor of the House bill, but Bill Cassidy from Louisiana, Republican, Joe Manchin and Menendez, two Democrats leading in the Senate. I'd like to think that will be part of a package as well. But schools are a very important element and must be part of the process, the bill that gets to the president probably this next month.
Thank you. Representative Dingell, same question about returning to school.
I think Fred laid out a lot of the issues, but this is a real crisis. And I think as COVID's been going on, there was this wishful, people struggled through, teachers struggled through, parents struggled through, children struggled through the spring and the end of the school year. And then we got to the summer and people asked a lot of questions and there weren't a lot of answers because there is no good situation right now. Teachers are afraid to go back to the classroom. They feel the responsibility for keeping their students safe. We know that from kindergarten through graduate school, medical school, law school, all the students need to be wearing masks. How do you keep 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds 6 feet apart? And how do you get them to wear masks? How do you have school buses that you keep children apart? And you need additional people on the bus because the school driver has to drive the bus and someone's got to be focused on masks and keeping students apart. And you need more buses, or you're seeing some schools begin to deal with this by doing 2 and 2, half schools 2 days a week, half the schools the other 2 days. And they're having to be, and the cost of PPE alone is costing many school systems $5 million, $6 million additional dollars a month to just have that available. And you'll see, you're talking about 3-year-olds to 20-something, 30-something. The University of North Carolina went back to school and is already, after a week, having to say, no classrooms. We're going to have to go to all online because of the very quick spread of COVID within the campus and very recognizable clusters immediately. And one of the problems we have with older students is, look, there aren't any of us that hate what COVID's done to our lives. We are human beings that want to feel that sense of connection. We miss friends. We miss being with people. Kids think that they're invincible. We saw what happened at Michigan State at the bar and how COVID spread across this state. And we know the fact of the matter is that graduation parties are one of the biggest causes of the increase in COVID clusters around the state. So we've got to deal with just the national inclination of youth that they want to see their friends, and how do you manage that? And how do you keep the teachers safe? And if they don't go back to school, childcare is one of, without fail, the biggest issues that we are facing. As people want to go back to work, how do you keep your children safe? How do you ensure that your children are really studying online? Parents assume even more responsibilities as caregivers, as also the educational providers. Teachers care about their children. They the children that they teach. And they want to make sure that they don't grow behind if they're going to only online. And how do we make sure that children in lower income communities who are not in well-off school districts and don't have the resources, that we keep them? All of our children deserve to have equal opportunity. Education is the most important tool we give to a child for their success in their future. There are a lot of questions, and I think that for a lot of school, you're starting to see all of the school districts now try to determine how they're going to start the school year. I make a prediction that what we are witnessing in North Carolina, we're going to witness in a lot of our school districts. How we start out isn't how we end up. And I think we're going to see more crises, not less, in the next few weeks. And that as communities, we've got to deal with this. As communities, there's costs associated with it. There's fear, there's families, there's making sure our children don't lose a year in their preparation of the next generation. And we're not going to solve it by fighting with each other or name calling each other or doing all the things that everybody wants to do. We cannot, we've got to stop this constant bickering, and we've got to say, our community's got a problem, and how are we going to solve it together?
Let me just add one thing too. You know, when this COVID crisis broke back in March, I was meeting with a number of students from Michigan State. I think they were in Debbie's district in her office before they came to my office. And that's literally when they got the word that they're going to do online learning the rest of the semester. And one of the young men who was in my office said, "Oh, that's not very good luck. I live in a community that doesn't even have broadband. How is that going to help me when I get thrown out of my dorm? I go back to my parents. It isn't available." As I talked to a number of our superintendents, we have as much as 70% of some of our school-age families don't have broadband. And maybe they might have one device and 3 kids. So who gets it? The 8th grader or the junior or the 3rd grader? And who's going to watch over that? So Jim Clyburn and I introduced a bill earlier this summer, bipartisan. We should get the problem solvers behind it. That will actually address the needs of states all over the country in terms of underserved areas. For Michigan, and I'm tired of excuses by these big guys. Oh, of course we'll get broadband to you, and we've heard that year after year after year. This bill, in the first year, will get $100 million to Michigan. They can start as early as this fall if we get this thing done. It's a 10-year bill, so it's $1 billion for Michigan, and will take care of wherever you live if you have that underserved area, to actually see some real positive changes, and maybe one of the silver linings of COVID as it turns out.
I will tell you, Representative, that's great news from a community college perspective that services multiple counties here in Kent County and some surrounding counties. We know that we have some of those very students who, from a connectivity perspective, definitely have a gap. And so that is so good to hear. Thank you for that. I'm going to transition a little bit. And let me also just remind our audience, we do have some questions that are coming in through the chat. Please continue to send those. I'm going to get to those after this next question. And actually, my next question has a bit to do with one of those questions, because Representatives, I'm transitioning now to just talking about some of the things that have happened in recent months just around racial unrest in our country. And as you both are aware, we've seen a host of protests and riots since the killing of George Floyd. And I want to direct this question, first of all, to Representative Dingell. What do you think are the needed ingredients to move our country towards civility in the discussion of race?
You know, I think that these are very complicated times. We have had systematic racism in our country, and we all watched. George Floyd was murdered. We watched that in front of our eyes, and we witnessed that. But what we've got to do is have some difficult and tough conversations. You know, I have found that they're uncomfortable. But I really, and I cannot put myself in the shoes of somebody who is Black in America, but I've talked to my friends. I do understand that there is a difference, that if you are a young Black man in America and stopped by a policeman, that there will be certain assumptions and you will be treated differently than a young white man. I know that we need criminal justice reform. That, I mean, I know people that if you I know people who had ounce, I have never smoked drugs in my life, but I know people that if you had an ounce of marijuana and you were Black, you ended up in prison, and you might not even been put on probation if you were a young white person. And I think that we need to try to understand each other. I think we've made progress. Women have been discriminated against for a long time too in this country. We too have made progress, but we're not where we need to be. So we need to find a way to have conversations that don't put kerosene on a fire, but get us to reflect and work together. John Lewis said it so well, that he had a dream of the one American family. And we're going to get to that one American family by celebrating our diversity. But remember that we all are human beings, that we're made by God and we're all equal. And what it's like to help understand what it is to be someone that's different from us and how they've been treated, but how we ensure and fight that they be treated equally and for their freedoms. And I think one of the things that's happened in this Black Lives Matter movement is that a lot of people have had feelings in how they've been treated, but we need to be very careful to not paint everybody too much in this country. The pendulum goes one way, then it goes the other way. There are bad people in law enforcement, like they're bad apples in a lot of different fields, but there are a lot of good people. And I live in a community, and many of us do, where law enforcement is the glue, and they keep us safe, and they do wellness checks, and they help veterans, and they help in domestic abuse cases, and if a senior is being hurt or robbed. So we need to thank the good people in all places, but take time to understand that there have been inequalities and understand it from the person who's experienced it, and try for both of us to grow and work for that more perfect union.
Great, thank you. Representative Upton, please.
Well, I agree with what Debbie said. Racism tragically is here. I can remember speaking to an MLK annual event that I do a year and a half ago, and my message was, if Dr. King was alive today, he actually wouldn't be very happy because we have not made the progress. And just in recent days, this road commissioner up in I don't know, Grand Traverse someplace, using the N-word like he did, you almost see daily reports of folks that are it's just awful. And all of us need to speak out against it and to try and move the process forward. I support peaceful protests. I marched with the BLM folks a number of times in my district, but I also speak out against violence. We saw that again in Kalamazoo just over this last weekend. I'm told this street where Debbie and I are right now, this was plywooded up until literally this weekend when they finally took the plywood off. And tragically, we lost a number of small businesses that were on the street that aren't going to come back. And as I heard, there are women-owned business as well, which even hurts even more. But we have to speak out. It's important, particularly for white folks, to speak out loudly, to recognize the discrepancies, and whether it be in the justice program, we need to make sure that our local police have the right resources as well. That's body cams and training. We need a registry to make sure that officers who really shouldn't be, who aren't doing the job that they should, aren't literally moved along from one community to another. Now just go back to the Problem Solvers Caucus again. Now, we've set up a task force, Republicans and Democrats. We've been meeting with Karen Bass, able leader of the Congressional Black Caucus, for hours over the last 4 or 5 weeks. And we're hoping that we can get a resolve. We'll see. I'm always an optimist, but I'm encouraged by the progress that we've made. and where we can go to make sure that we as a nation are better off, and our folks across the board have the resources to make sure that our communities are safe, and particularly folks of color will feel better because of the actions we take.
Great, thank you so much. I want to transition over to one of the questions that's been asked from our chat just in the last several minutes. And the question is why is it so hard to find common ground in the issues of the day? Is it as simple as that we do not have mutual respect for each other? And is it an issue that we cannot listen, which is a fundamental of leadership? So starting off, Representative Upton, why is it so hard for us to find common ground on the issues of today? Why do you think that has played its way so strongly into what we see today in DC and across the country?
No, every member of Congress is different. They have a different background. They have a different maybe agenda. They have a little different district. They work hard to get elected, raise usually millions of dollars to do that. It's probably the part of the life that we all hate the most. Certainly our spouses do. But you got to take the time to develop those relationships. You know, for me, I was lucky. I worked for a great president at the White House, Reagan. He was not a partisan guy. He won 49 states when he was up for re-election. He had wonderful relations with not only with John Dingell, but others, members of Congress on both sides of the aisle. There are classic stories about Tip O'Neill and him having drinks up in the balcony of the White House almost every week. But they had a relationship. They knew their families. It's maybe it is a little different today, which is why the Problem Solvers Caucus is so valuable, because there is a trust. By meeting literally every week, it's like your own committee. You get to know people in their districts. We have a pledge that it's keeping our lips sealed. There's not going to be any tattling about what people might say as we try to work on the issues of the day, whatever they might be, whether it be gun violence or, I mean, you name it. But we also take a pledge that we're not going to work against each other. I had a call last week from a former colleague, and she's running against a member of the Problem Solvers, a Democrat. This is a Republican former colleague. And I can't help. We have a pledge. We are not going to involve ourselves in other people's races that are members of the Problem Solvers. We try to have that same standard here among our Michigan colleagues, so that you know that you can work together. You're not going to have to worry about someone coming back at you and stabbing you in the back somehow. But that trust is developed so that we went down to the border, to the Texas border, to talk about immigration. We had, as a group, as a bipartisan group that went down there, we learned a lot, particularly for those of us that have never really been on the southern border. But by developing that trust and the association that we have then with the caucus, we were able to pursue legislation on immigration that hadn't happened in the House for, 15, 20 years. So you got to develop those relationships. That's what this is. It's a networking job. It's so that you can trust someone, understand their perspective, and figure out where you can find that common ground, as Debbie said, whether it's fighting for the Great Lakes or the auto industry or jobs or childcare or the things that really all of us deeply care about.
Thank you so much, Representative Upton. Representative Dingell, that same question. Why is it so hard to find common ground on these issues?
So I'm going to chime in. I agree with all things Fred said, but first of all, I'm going to tell you, I think social media when it was founded, it was supposed to be something that connects us. And I think social media is destroying us as a society for several reasons. First of all, people don't talk to each other anymore. If I give a graduation speech or speaking at a college or a high school, I tell everybody, I even say to the kids who work for me, call somebody. A call for them is text somebody. You don't listen. You don't exchange ideas. We stopped developing personal relationships. Social media is impacting the quality of people's interpersonal relationships. Secondly, the things that we say to each other on social media and in person are so unacceptable. The bullying, the name calling, the finger pointing, and quite frankly, the threats are unacceptable. And all of us need to start standing up to it. I think that the anonymity of being able to post something on social media, but you're not anonymous. People do know who you are, although many of them are bots. It's contributing to a deterioration in conversation that's just quite frankly unacceptable. So I quite frankly am calling people, and if they're a friend or foe, if I don't like what you say, I call you on it, because we got to stop. We got to start calling each other on it. And I think, you know, my husband was known as the king of Twitter, but I hope he was never mean. And I think we got to lose this meanness. It's not acceptable, and we got to quit laughing at it. We got to start to stand up to people being bullied. Go ahead.
You're right. I was going to say, John Dingle, wait for this noisy ladder truck to go by. John Dingle was great. We all knew that he used his BlackBerry because I would sit with him I'd catch up with him in Detroit. I don't have a direct flight by South Bend or Kalamazoo. So I'd catch up with him in Detroit, like I'd catch up with Debbie, and then we'd fly together to DC or back, and he'd be working his BlackBerry. He had the best tweets. Even the week that he died, he had things that were just like, why can't we do it? Some of us do some of that. But, as it respect to social media, my wife won't let me look at some of the stuff.
It's just vile.
Yeah, it is.
You got to stop.
That's a good one. I was looking for a 4-letter word. Vile is a good one.
Vile is a better word.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I will say is that, and this is something else, John Dingle, I'm very much my own person, trust me, but he taught me a lot. God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And we need to listen more and talk less. And I also think that, one of the things that's happened, I'm equal of it. The minute that last vote is over, I'm on the plane home. I want to be home. I don't want to be down there. But that means you don't get to know each other anymore. You don't, it used to be your kids went to school together. You'd have potluck dinners. Now the men didn't like it when the women came into the gyms, but George Bush and Don Rumsfeld and John Dingle and Jerry Ford played paddleball. That's how they
every week.
That's how they got to be good friends, and they trusted each other, and they knew everything about everybody. But that builds respect, that builds trust. Somebody's word is good, and they're not. In those days, people did something because it was the right thing to do for their country, their community, not what finger in the air, what was going to be popular or what was going to get covered on social media. And that's a problem. We need to get back to doing what's right for our communities and less what's going to get you a lot of social media attention.
So 2 weeks ago, I got a text from the governor, and she was very concerned about the reimbursement rates for our National Guard, dropping from 100% being paid by the feds because of COVID to 75%, which happens this week. And a number of states got waivers. She came to me because I was a Republican administration. She said, Fred, what can you do? I said, watch. No, I didn't quite say that. I said, I'm calling Debbie. And the two of us got on the phone. We worked on a letter that 13 of the 14 members of the Michigan House delegation signed to the administration asking that we be treated like the other states that got a waiver. We've had nearly 100,000 Michiganders that have been treated positive for COVID. Over almost 6,500 of those 100,000 have died, way higher than anybody anticipated. There is no way that we should be treated differently than California or Texas or Connecticut or Florida. And that's what our letter said. We're hoping to get a response back, but that's what you call a relationship. I can call Debbie's cell, she can call mine. Usually we're on it, so you got to trade back and forth. You're it, as we say. But at the end, we got to work together. And, within literally 24 hours, almost every one of us in our delegation signed a letter to the administration showing that it was bipartisan and we'd like some action like the other states got.
And just to build on that, during the COVID crisis, I was one of the first people that got calls from hospitals, and I go, Fred, we have a problem. And we talk it through, and we get on the phone, and we call the hospitals, and we called the Michigan Hospital Association and said, why aren't you talking to us and telling us what you have to do. And we spearheaded that, or, you know, the PPE equipment. I can't tell you, all of the members of the delegation were making calls to China and trying to figure out the quality of PPE. And we were all working. Nobody thought Republican or Democratic in those early days. We thought we needed to help our communities and help the nurses and the doctors and the bus drivers and the grocery store workers that were on the front line. And what did we do together? How did we cut through where was the problem, and what did we do together to cut through it?
That's just very interesting in your responses. It reminds me of the used to be power of the handshake, what a handshake used to mean. And we've got to get back to that type of civility that handshakes us, along with conversation, truly moves us as a people and as a country. We're coming down to the last few minutes. I appreciate folks who have fired questions through the chat. I want to end with one quick question it's actually a couple of questions I'm going to try to condense into one that really just talks about what's coming up this November as far as the election is concerned, and getting to all the conversation right now that's happening around just the voting process and how that happens. How have, and Representative Upton, I'd love for you to respond to this first. How has the problem solvers, what have they thought, what have you thought as the problem solvers in terms of how we can really have strong answers and effective answers as we here in COVID-19 environment, yet having a major elections coming up in November? How does the problem solvers, how are they looking at this in terms of how we can best go about this idea of voting as a state and as a country? How are the problem solvers positioned on that?
Well, a couple of things, and we're going to see the bill that we're going to be voting on Saturday tomorrow. It hasn't been written yet, hasn't been introduced. I think we know many of the basic elements of it. We need to make sure that the ballots are safe, but like any first-class mail needs to get there on time, whether it's your medication, whether it's a birthday card, whether it's a bill payment, whether it's your Social Security check. And we have nearly 1 million recipients that don't have it automatically deposited in their financial institution. And there has been slippage, let's face it. Postal Service has been losing money for obvious reasons. A lot of bills are coming online now, so they're not sending those out, even bank statements, a whole number of things that people are typing online versus sending love letters or whatever the mail might be going out. So you've had losing revenue, you added costs, and I would guess, have tried to make up for this, but this cost cutting, which delays mail, is not right. We can't do that. Our office has been flooded with calls from constituents complaining about the lengthy delays. I know one individual who applied for an absentee ballot. It took 10 days for the letter from the date it was postmarked to get to his house. And guess what? It came election day. He couldn't fill it out and send it back even by FedEx. We got to make sure that those ballots are counted. For me, I've always encouraged voter participation. Absentee ballot, I think our process in Michigan is pretty secure. I'm not aware of any fraud. You actually send an application or drop it off at your clerk. They send you the ballot. They look at the signature on the form when it comes back before they feed it into the machine. They keep the ballot. It's not like the old chads that we might have seen a lot of years ago, and certainly Florida highlighted. But we got to make sure that those ballots are safe, that the right resources are there, and it's timely delivery. Something that we've seen, I think, a lapse on over the last number of months. And we're going to have a bill on Saturday to vote on that will deal with it. And, quite frankly, and I'll just close on this, as we look at the next COVID package, I think all parties were saying the post offices need more resources. They're cutting back way too much. They need to have those resources. There was money in all of these packages for the Postal Service. We need to make sure that it gets there so we don't have these delays in people's medicine or ballots or whatever is delayed.
Thank you, Representative Upton. Representative Dingell, please, same question, voting.
So, like I frequently do, I agree with all that Fred said. But I almost think you've got to divide that into two different issues. I've been worried about the post office for the last couple of years, long before it ever became hot in the last couple of weeks. And quite frankly, Mark Meadows I had a town hall in Ypsilanti Township 2 years ago that they tried to cancel 2 days before. And Mark Meadows told the Postmaster General if they canceled it, he was coming out and doing a hearing with me. So there's another bipartisan example that would probably stun the world. And I am worried about Postal Service. It's one of the oldest agencies in the history of this country. It was in the Constitution. Benjamin Franklin was the first Postmaster General. And it's a glue of a civil society. And many people in our communities rely on it and can't afford FedEx or United Parcel Service or whatever other private mail services is. And it is how veterans get their medicine. I just happened to help one of the less than 1 million, but there are 1 million seniors that still are given an exemption and are able to get their checks by mail. She gets it, but Social Security communicates with most of its people who are paying into it and recipients by mail. People are ordering online that are afraid to go out. They're just, bills are still paid. The mail is a really important function of our civilized society. And it's got issues. We got to figure out what those issues are, but you don't, as you're going into an election and have a president of the United States talk about it deliberately connected to the election, tell postal workers they can't work overtime, which is resulting in backups of mails in post offices across the country. And I know for a fact, Michigan, you don't take out the machines that sort the mail, and you don't remove boxes that people mail at. That's a problem. And that's why this hue and outcry, and we need to do something to address it and not relate it to an election time, which we need to, at the time of COVID, we need to improve, democracy thrives with maximum participation. We need to encourage each and every person to vote, and voting at home is the safest way to do that. And you should be able to rely on the Postal Service, and we can't right now. And in the end, we all, the basic right that each of us has in this democracy, where we do, and I don't think any of us can take freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of press, or due process for granted in the way that when we were taught in school, this is what a democracy means. We had it, and we didn't understand what it meant. We took it for granted. We can't take our democracy for granted. We have to look at the pillars of it. And each of us, the basic right we have, that basic privilege, is to exercise our vote. And we need to do everything we can to encourage every American, no matter what they think. That's what America is, a blend of lots of different people, lots of different thoughts, to participate on Election Day by casting their vote and showing that they care about the future of our country.
And folks with, that are seeing, we've had no reason absentee voting for some time now, really have. So whether you're a senior in your 90s or younger, whether you've got some pre-existing illness, particularly with COVID, there are a lot of people that I know that simply are not going to go into a building. They're not going to stand in line, whether it be in the post office or the grocery store. We've got to make sure that they're protected too. And that's where that absentee ballot, at least in Michigan, we know that it works. I voted absentee on August 4th. Why? Because I thought Congress might be in session. So I cast my vote for myself back in July, and I dropped it off physically at the clerk's office so that I knew it would get there. A lot of people did that. And you know what? Maybe nearly 100% more people voted in some areas than had before, because absentee ballot voting is easy, as it should be.
Well, what a rich discussion. I want to thank both of you, and I'm going to give it over to Mike Dandanua here in a second, but Representative Dingell, Representative Upton, thank you so much for your representation of this state. And thank you for this conversation that shows what civility and collegiality is all about, to have both of you sitting at the table in discussing the issues and being able to do it in such a civil manner that truly what you've done so well today is point out what that common ground truly looks like. And I am very and deeply appreciative to the fact of knowing that both of you represent us in Washington, D.C. I'm going to give it over now to a good friend of mine. He is the policy chairman for the West Michigan Policy Forum and a person who I value highly, Mike Gender-Noah. Mike, please.
Yeah, appreciate you moderating today, Bill, and good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank each and every one of you who joined the conversation today. All four of our sponsors, the Gerald R. Ford Foundation, West Michigan Policy Forum, Grand Rapids Chamber, and Southwest Michigan First, have cultures that value and prioritize collaboration and support it for all citizens and legislators working together to engage in a way to think about common sense solutions. It starts with a willingness to listen and an opportunity to put oneself and one's political party on the sideline for just a moment to support what is in the greater good. Certainly with COVID-19, there's no better time than now to have this conversation. This event was taped and will continue to be available on all the partners' Facebook pages. We hope you'll tell many others to listen to this conversation and to push for more bipartisan solutions to our nation's problems. I want to thank the U.S. Representatives Fred Upton and Debbie Dingell for your willingness to work together, but very importantly, your willingness to work in Washington, D.C. with your Problem Solvers Caucus. We're very proud to have two elected officials from our state that have this commitment to collaborate. So again, thank you all for joining us today, and we are adjourned.